Very good.
Hi, everyone. This is Miranda with the Valuable Voices podcast. I have Tim Price here, who is an author. I will let him tell you more about his book. I'm super excited to hear your story, Tim. Thanks for being on.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, Miranda. I love that you give people the opportunity to share about what they're doing and give the opportunity for the many voices that are out there, because we're all out doing something different.
Exactly. Yeah. I find it fascinating just to hear everybody's story and the books they're writing, the speaking they're doing. So I know we met on Facebook and I love meeting people from all over. So yeah, let's dive right in. Just go ahead and share, kind of your story and about your book, and we'll point people to the website and go from there.
Very good. Well, about 20 years ago, I came across a reference to a book, and I thought, well, I'm kind of interested, so I'll get a copy of it. And I got through interlibrary loan this book. It's called The Labyrinth of the World and the Paradise of the Heart. And it's a Christian allegory from 1623. And I got the book and I was absolutely astounded, because I had become very familiar with Pilgrim's Progress. Almost everybody knows Pilgrim's Progress. But what I found in this book is something far beyond Pilgrim's Progress. In fact, I think it's, if I can say such a thing, I think it's a better book, a healthier book, because Pilgrim's Progress is concentrated on getting to the celestial city and going to someday, and that's great. It's, concentrated on problems of getting through the world, almost as if the world has to be tolerated on the way through. There is no concentration on a transformed life. There is no concentration on being a servant to the world and being an ambassador to the world. But that's not the case with this other book. In this other book, I read, I got a copy for myself. I bought a copy. I read it to my children. They were astounded equally as well. My wife was astounded. And I was so wrapped into this book that I got an earlier copy, a 1901 edition. This book has not been in English only since 1901. And that edition is like reading Chaucer. And there's nothing wrong with Chaucer, but that's not really approachable for the average bear. The 1998 edition is a Catholic edition, and they attempt to make the author sound Catholic, which there's nothing wrong with being a Catholic, but let's be intellectually honest about, the content that we're working with. And I found that the British edition, the Oxford edition, tried to make the author sound like a Calvinist. And he definitely wasn't a Calvinist. He wasn't not a Calvinist, and he worked with many Calvinists, but he was definitely his own person. And so it was back then that I came up with the idea of making the book more approachable for the average bear. So starting in 2020, shortly after I got a bad diagnosis from my doctor and I lost my career, lost my house, and had to move to another town, I thought, wow, what a perfect opportunity to take on something that I really, really wanted to do and bring out a book that I think is a lot healthier. Now, just a little bit of background about the book. The author lost his entire family to the plague, and his country was ripped apart by political and religious factions fighting one another. How contemporary does that sound, right? Amazing, right? I mean, that's exactly what's happening in this country today. Yeah. And yet he was able to rise above all that to be what is known today. He's known widely as the father of modern education. Did you go to recess as a child in school?
Sure
Well,
did.
you can thank the author of this book, because he wrote a book called The School of Play. Okay. And in his educational process was about enveloping students, not with just rote and memorization, but pictures, colors, physical involvements where they could, let some steam off and all this kind of good stuff, and a very staged and stepped process of progression of education. And he was asked to be the first president of Harvard College, now Harvard University, to give you an idea about this character. He wrote more than 140 volumes.
Wow.
And another 40 that were volumes that were unpublished. And there are about 600 letters to every intellectual and big shot in the 17 and 1600s that you can think of. He's an amazing guy, a phenom of phenoms. But what impressed me about this book is that it presented two kingdoms. What Anabaptists understand as two kingdoms. There's the kingdom of God and the kingdom of the world. The two will never mix. But what also impressed me, and I think we need to embrace that in our lives, is that the kingdom of the world is never going to be the kingdom of God. And so we need to be the kingdom of God. We need to live truth and reality that God inspires us with amidst the world for them to see, and it will contrast their hypocrisy and their sinfulness and evil with truth and love, justice, righteousness, and all this. We can't expect them to be those things, and we can't make them those things, but we can be those things. And I think that's a very solid message. But in this story, it's a dystopian, semi-biographical allegory. So it's a little bit different than Pilgrim's Progress, but it is exactly the same as Pilgrim's Progress in that it has a pilgrim going through the world, and he's led by a pair of guides with character trait names, Mr. Ubiquitous and Mr. Delusion, who seek to get him to see the world the way they want him to see it. Not the way it is, but the way they want him to see it. And he can't figure out how to live a good life without contributing to the vanity, the violence, and the despair that he sees in every corner of life, whether it's marriage, whether it's politics, whether it's military, whether it's academia, whether it's church, what have you.
Yeah.
And he is brought before the Queen Wisdom, the Queen of the world, Wisdom Queen of the world. There we go. Wisdom Queen of the world, in judgment that he hasn't made a decision to join the world in the vanity and violence and despair, and made it okay. And his guides then abandon him because he won't make a decision, at which point he meets Christ, and Christ transforms his mind and heart, and then sends him back into the world to be light, truth, and a reality the world can't be for itself.
Yeah.
Now that is a solid message, I mean to tell you.
Yeah.
So what we did to make the book more approachable is that we broke out the dialogue into separate paragraphs, as most modern novels and fiction stories are.
Yeah.
We also made assignments where there was pronounced confusion. You didn't know who was really talking to whom. You could figure it out, but it wasn't just straightforward, easy to understand. We assigned the comments to characters based upon the tone of those characters and the tone of the comment that had been developed prior. We also changed a few words. For instance, the word Christian is almost a useless word anymore. If there are certain reprobates in public society that can be thought of as Christian, who are accepted as Christian, but yet they can be absolute reprobates, well, the word isn't really practical anymore. If there's white supremacists and other people that are the same way. So we traded the word Christian for the words follower of Christ, because either you're following him or you're not.
Yeah.
And it's unequivocal, it's unmistakable. The other thing we did was we traded the word church, the English word church, for the word ecclesia, because the word ecclesia is the Greek word that the Bible writers used for the gathering of believers, which is altogether different than a building on the corner that somebody can attend to if they want and think they're serving Jesus. I want people to struggle over the concept difference there. We also added illustrations throughout the book. Can you imagine reading Little House on the Prairie without illustrations, or Tom Sawyer without Norman Rockwell's illustrations. They just wouldn't be the same book.
Mhm.
And we wanted the book to become a type of book that homeschoolers could use, that parents could use, that churches could use to instill the idea that we, as followers of Christ, are the kingdom of God amongst the kingdoms of men, and that we have a responsibility to reach out, to be ambassadors, to be alien strangers, and to serve the world with truth and love and justice. They need to see those things in us before they're ever affected by those things. And I think that is such a solid message for the religious community today.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing. That's amazing, fascinating. I've always been inspired by writers, so I think that's awesome. You mentioned homeschoolers. Would you say this is for kids, for adults, for, what kind of age group, or who are you writing for?
It's written or rewritten at a 10th grade level, but even the Catholic edition that is probably college age, my young teens understood.
Okay.
And when we had fun with this will be practical. I read Little House on the Prairie to my kids. I read Pilgrim's Progress to my kids, and even young people would understand it. There was some Latin that was weaved into the work that was just lingering here and there in the other editions. And what I did was I wrote the definitions in so that as you're reading, you can read the definition and it's pretty understandable for the average bear, because I'm not a big intellectual or whatever. And I don't think that necessarily people are served by that whole 9 yards.
Right.
I did not dumb the book down.
Sure.
And I use colloquialisms and idiomatic phrases that would be commensurate to where he was going and what he did. And I weaved in a few treasures here and there that the average person is going to say, "Oh, yeah, this is interesting. This is funny." The book is entertaining, very entertaining.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I'm excited to get my hands on it. So have you always wanted to be a writer? I think you said you'd written a couple other books as well, correct?
Yes, I started writing in 2005. I wrote a book called The Diluted Church, calling believers to live out of their true heritage over and against the one that so many religious people have assumed, that Jesus is a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Republican. And I'm sorry, he's not. And he's not a multiculturalist Democrat Marxist either. So I'll clear the boards on that one. Jesus was his own man, and Jesus was doing something that the religious and political left and right of his day killed him over. And so we need to get back to that basic message that conflicts the world. It's not a bad message, and it's not evil that we're conflicting people, but we need to get back to the message that causes people to perk up and say, "Oh, that's not what the Republicans are talking about, and that's not what the Democrats are talking about. That's what Jesus is talking about."
Yeah, love it. Awesome. Good for you. Well, thanks again for being on. I will put the link in here. I'm excited for people to, again, get just a version that maybe we can understand a little bit better and use in today's world. So thanks for being on, and thanks for sharing your story. I love it.
Yeah, it's available on Amazon in 3 forms: hardbound edition, ebook, and audiobook for the first time in history. And we will be bringing out a softbound edition later on. The book is full color, and there is both the narrative, and in the back there is a biographical, historical, and legacy section that explains the author, and it has lots of pictures back there. Again, he's an amazing guy, John Amos Comenius, and The Labyrinth of the World and the Paradise of the Heart.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Miranda.
And have a great day.